Portland, Oregon, one of the nation's most beautiful cities, with Mount Hood rising in the distance, majestic, serene, white with eternal snow. Portland is a city of wide streets, modern buildings. The citizens of Portland attend many fine churches. Portland is a city of beautiful homes. In the soft climate, gardens grow lush and green throughout the year. Roses are everywhere in profusion. For years, Portland has been known as the City of Roses. It is a family town, a good place to bring up children. And yet...
Now this is Portland, Oregon. I live here. This is where the rest of the story happens. And the setup.
Portland hardly runs the risk of cinematic overexposure, but when we see a real Portland movie, we remember it. Sometimes we think we've seen a Portland movie when we've actually seen a California movie, or a Vancouver movie, or a Dallas movie in drag, but every now and again we get a genuine piece of Portland cinema, one with a sense of place. You can't identify that sense of place, of course, by a film's establishing downtown skyline shots alone, but Portland, despite or because of its architectural modesty, has inspired a disproportionate number of memorable ones. Downtown skyline shots of any city indicate not just place, but time. You can often date a film with some precision just by counting the buildings. This makes for a nitpicker's delight when it comes to period pieces like Gus Van Sant's Drugstore Cowboy. Though set in the Portland of 1971, it doesn't avert its eyes from all the towers not yet finished at that time. Does the Wells Fargo Center, the city's tallest, count as an anachronism for not having opened until 1972?
It's hard being a dope fiend, and it's even harder.
As very much a street-level story, Van Sant's previous film and debut feature, Mala Noche, doesn't have any straight skyline shots, or much else in the way of straightness, for that matter. For most of his days, its protagonist, Walt, watches the streets of Portland through the windows of the convenience store where he clerks, dreaming of just one night with the exotic object of his unrequited longings, a teenage Mexican laborer who's just found his way into town after his last stretch of work near Los Angeles. In a way, Mala Noche marks the beginning of the modern urban cinema of Portland. Van Sant made it in the mid-1980s, an era when a large part of the cityscape took its modern form. Portland's much-admired urban growth boundary had come into effect just before the decade began, incentivizing the unusually concentrated downtown to come, at least by the standards of mid-size American cities. Van Sant and the few other filmmakers on intimate terms with Portland would go on to discover and tell their stories with the distinctive elements of the city's built environment that then emerged. Down on the ground, the first of the Max Light rail trains that crisscrossed the city and its bedroom communities entered service in 1986. They've given the movies a particularly uncomfortable step in a set of threatening instructions for a millionaire timber magnate dropping off blackmail money, a place for guy talk.
She's like sitting there like, what the fuck is the problem? Like, she doesn't even know there's this like nasty yogurt shit dripping out her cunt. And I'm like, well, the fucked up part is like, she's 14, so I'm like thinking, where the fuck is this girl's snatch been at 14, man? Like, she's so fucked up, you know what I mean?
An environment of loneliness, something to pass in the night, or, as the last true B-movie auteur Albert Pyun uses it in his Andrew Dice Clay vehicle Brain Smasher: A Love Story, a mobile escape route from a gang of power-mad kung fu monks. The presence of Max gives Portland, and especially Portland on screen, a more traditionally urban look and feel compared to those other mid-size American cities, despite the fact that in practice, the system mainly serves suburban commuters. In 2004, members of the rural Washington spiritual sect Ramtha's School of Enlightenment made much use of it in the pseudoscientific docudrama What the Bleep Do We Know? Its main character, a divorced antidepressant popping photographer, spends a lot of time on Max, riding it into downtown as the movie opens. But you don't have to ride the trains in Portland. You can walk, you can skateboard, you can ride a bus, or you can ride a bike.
I can smell my name on it. Hey, Mikey. How long have I been here on the streets, on this crusade?
Huh. Well, I came back to town around 3.5 years ago, and that's when I met you, so it's been...
It's been 3 years, Mike.
Yeah, almost 4 years. That's a long time.
What I'm getting at, Mike, is that we're still alive.
Yeah. Well, that's obvious, isn't it?
Yeah. It's incredibly obvious. They could drop a big old bomb in this city, you know what we would do?
Take shelter.
You can also ride a motorcycle, an especially convenient way to get around when disaster clears the streets. Portland's investment in what America still insists on calling alternative transportation now looks like wise foresight, but it's the driving sequences that reveal the city's variety of both urban and suburban textures.
Talking about, I mean, the Voting Rights Act was a great thing.
When Reagan talked about, but Hugh, I'll tell you this.
Framed correctly, Portland could potentially play most of the downtowns or suburbs in the country, and Kelly Reichardt uses that to her advantage in a scene from Wendy and Lucy, in which a Walgreens parking lot plays one of the most generic spaces imaginable in the grim, near-placeless Pacific Northwest exurbia through which the titular homeless protagonist and her dog must struggle.
You can't sleep here, ma'am. You can't sleep out here, it's not allowed.
Okay.
3 years before Max started rolling, Portland's built environment gained an even more distinguishing feature in Skidmore, Owings & Merrill's U.S. Bancorp Tower, better known as Big Pink, a building on which a film can rely to locate a scene in Portland's urban space. For his own first movie, the unconventional detective story and black romantic comedy Zero Effect, Jake Kasdan came to town and shot Big Pink with apparent relish, especially in this close-up the management specifically told him not to take. Perhaps Big Pink in its way made the modern urban cinema of Portland possible. Even in black and white, it appears as a prominent point of reference in Mala Noche, and naturally, Van Sant includes it in the picture's brief color passages as well. The movies haven't done much with Big Pink as an interior location, but you know someone has made it big in Portland, probably by less than moral means, if their office affords a view of it. Though 10 feet shorter than the much-criticized Wells Fargo Center, completed a decade earlier by corporate skyscraper auteur Charles Luckman, Big Pink stands as by far the superior symbol of Portland. Tall, but not too tall. Unusually, but not too unusually shaped. Boldly, but not too boldly colored. The words of Jan Morris, which describe Portland as one of the few big American cities that never succumbed to the high-rise epidemic, still hold relatively true, but the city hasn't gone without disputes over its built form. Penny Allen's 1978 land use satire Property tells of a loose group of bohemians who try to scrape together the cash and the respectability to purchase outright their block of Victorian houses, a highly dilapidated and even then highly redevelopable piece of an older Portland. The story came out of Allen's own real-life involvement in the fight to downzone the Corbett-Terwilliger-Lair Hill neighborhood, south of downtown.
God damn, this is really kind of obscene.
On the whole, the movies have shown less interest in Portland's buildings than in its bridges, especially as signifiers of death, fear, and illicit behavior.
Oh, wow. Oh, did you get by Warren's to see if he could come?
Yeah, hey, Warren's dead. He jumped off Suicide Bridge.
What?
In Portland Expose, Harold Schuster's true crime noir morality play about 1930s Chicago-style gangsters who forced gambling and prostitution onto this wholesome, still faintly backwoods city, the Steel Bridge bears stern witness to an exchange of dirty money.
Come on, you're gonna fall!
The 1 year newer Broadway Bridge has played a few more roles, most notably as a locus of insecurity, shame, and eventual triumph for Maddie, the high school senior protagonist of Foxfire, Annette Haywood Carter's 1996 adaptation of the Joyce Carol Oates novel. An androgynous, prematurely hard-bitten teenage drifter comes to town in order to dislodge Maddie's middle-class complacency, a campaign she launches by climbing on top of the bridge after grabbing the portfolio that'll get Maddie into art school. Many trials and much female bonding later, the story ends with Maddie scaling the bridge herself in a helicopter shot that pulls out to show us not just its lack of visual trickery, but also Big Pink, identifying the Portland that goes the whole film, never explicitly named.
I only have 2 hands. Is she here? Is she here right now?
Body of Evidence, the highly unerotic erotic thriller starring Madonna, likes Portland's bridges so much that it twists the city's geography to allow for a driving sequence that crosses not one but two of them, and in a row no less.
Come on, how much?
8 million, give or take.
That's a hell of a motive.
He's gonna drag out every dirty little thing you ever did.
It wasn't dirty.
No, not to you, not to Andrew. But people here have very conservative views about sex.
No, they don't. They just don't talk about it.
In 2008, the equally tacky Untraceable brought to Portland a cross between a Hollywood techno-thriller and a mild interpretation of the horror subgenre known as torture porn. But it did it in a mainstream fashion with a mainstream budget, allowing for a series of elaborately swooping aerial shots scored with increasing ominousness as they appear throughout the movie, the likes of which more respectable Portland films can't even consider.
Let me introduce Special Agent in charge of the FBI's Portland Field Office.
I just went to the site after the guy was dead.
I got a list of assholes my girlfriends and me think he ought to kill.
Man last seen 5 days ago. FBI agents have been working around the clock.
Portland police have to person.
These pay a lot of attention to the bridges, but so does the plot. Its villain, the son of a local professor turned internet-fueled celebrity sadist after a news clip of his father's suicide on the Broadway Bridge goes viral, traps its FBI special agent heroine on it by somehow hacking into her car.
Hello, Jennifer. Under that streetlight. That's where my father's body fell over the railing. Some websites show the whole thing in slow motion because it's just so much better that way.
The production also uses locations under the bridges, from a diner it built whole beneath the site of the suicide to the real Burnside skate park, first built illegally beneath the Burnside Bridge by Portland skateboarders themselves, but later approved by the city. The year before, it played the title role in Gus Van Sant's Paranoid Park.
Dude, I don't think I'm ready for Paranoid Park. Yeah, but no one's ever really ready for Paranoid Park.
A name informally granted in real life to O'Brien Square, a historically drug user-friendly work of mid-century urbanism a few blocks below Burnside. That film makes even more use of the obscurely ominous feeling that Portland can, at the right time and in the right season, provoke. What makes the city feel that way? The rain? The gray skies, which a movie like Untraceable tweaks to make even grayer? The weathered industrial landscape at its edges? Two 30-something friends pass through it while leaving town in Kelly Reichardt's Old Joy, a journey that comes within sight of another Portland structure the movies love, or would love if more were aware of it, the St. John's Bridge. Zero Effect's blackmailed millionaire encounters it as just one more step in the gauntlet.
Number 4, funds in hand, walk to the nearest bus stop.
A Shakespearean robbery goes down beneath it in Gus Van Sant's My Own Private Idaho.
It's like he's a little thirsty.
Up against the wall, you silly scumbag.
Quasi-professional Mark and thoroughly bohemian Kurt, the two men in Old Joy, see it out their window on their meandering way to Bagby Hot Springs, 3 hours outside the city. The dampened moods of Portland have a way of attenuating the city's sexuality. Portland films reflect this with a variety of potentially sexually charged scenes that never go off. Body of Evidence does strain for the erotic, but in vain, and the causes of its dissatisfactions go far beyond the setting of this unerotic city. Other movies use the desexualization of Portland to their advantage. Paranoid Park's soul sex scene emphasizes nothing but the main character's psychological detachment, and Property simply goes for laughs.
hot. I want your blouse, a blouse, nightgown, whatever this is. I want it open with the fur around me.
You really
I
want a
to
piece
feel
of
it.
ass.
You want
You
a piece
really
of
want
ass?
to buy a piece of
I
ass.
want to buy a piece of ass. That's right. Is this good, legal, and tender, huh? Come here, Lola. Fatima.
Mala Noche treats sex as a utilitarian exchange, often with an avid buyer, a grudging seller, and actual money changing hands, negotiated or otherwise.
Breathless and torn, I could feel my eyes turning into dust.
Parts of Foxfire and Old Joy approach a less transactional homoeroticism, but stop at its edge.
Hey, what's going on?
Just relax, man. Just settle in.
All right.
What happens in the woods stays in the woods, one would think, but maybe some of that Portland ominousness owes to the sense of encirclement they produce. Films tend to regard the nature around Portland as a combination of retreat from and prison of the city, often incorporating interludes in the form of journeys into it. The middle of Mala Noche finds Walt on a day trip with both his Mexican teenager of choice and the one he takes as the next best thing. Aaron Katz's Cold Weather nearly opens with one, as the central brother and sister take a spur-of-the-moment drive all the way through this nature out to the coast. Sometimes, even in movies as different as Old Joy and Zero Effect, all you really need to do is get out there and fire off a few rounds.
Okay. Try again.
Pursued by an aggressive Portland cop, drugstore cowboys' band of pharmacy-robbing dope fiends leave town in search of at once bigger and safer scores, which works until it doesn't. After a botched hospital job and the overdose of his youngest charge, Bob, the ringleader, finds himself on a bus bound right back to Portland, his injured head filled with visions of going straight. Bob can get out of drug addiction, it seems, but he can't get out of Portland.
The mysterious and brilliant Daryl Zero.
Though based in Los Angeles, I'd like to think that Daryl Zero, the eccentric and protean private investigator at the center of Zero Effect, digs Portland. His unsurpassed astuteness may have got him commanding unsurpassed fees, and living in a custom-built Century City apartment monogrammed with steel vault doors. But he's only in the game for the thrill of objective observation. Well, that, and to support his canned tuna, amphetamine, and askew country western songwriting habits.
It's good. It's really good.
We see more compositional talent in Glenn Holland, the title music teacher of Mr. Holland's Opus, which covers 30 years of American history without ever leaving the environs of Portland. Mr. Holland begins with grand ambitions to write the Great American Symphony, ambitions at which the film slowly but tirelessly chips away.
You know, when I said that you should go to New York, I didn't mean right away. You have so much time.
If I wait, I'll never do it. I'll end up waiting tables or working in some store. It has to be now. You could come with me.
It taunts him with the opportunity to escape to New York with an admiring student, but by that point in his career, the weakened Mr. Holland has long since lost his will. He now knows Portland has him, as it has since Frame 1. This chilling tale ends less in an American symphony than an American homily. It turns out that Mr. Holland's real opus was the children, now the responsible townspeople, all along. I first saw this educator's fantasy when still a child myself, and even then couldn't buy its 19th century bill of goods. Still, it at least doesn't allow its protagonist's efforts to come to nothing at all, instead converting his ambitious ambitions into, if you will, unambitious ambitions, a transformation essayed by more Portland films than this one. Aaron Katz has thus far set 2 features in his hometown of Portland. In his first Dance Party USA, a group of high schoolers and recent graduates converge at a suburban 4th of July house party. There, a 17-year-old self-styled ladies' man of maximum crudity named Gus encounters a fellow young Portlander whose escape attempt, by his own admission, hit the rocks right away.
So what are you doing here?
I don't know, I guess I didn't really know what I was doing, and I ran out of money, and I'm back, you know. I had this job in Texas, but fuck, I didn't want to stay there.
After doing his second picture in New York, Katz himself returned to Portland, if only temporarily, for his third, the millennial noir Cold Weather, by whose opening its mildly schlubby hero, a dropout of both forensic science school and a culinary internship, has shrugged his way back from Chicago to move in with his sister.
Would you consider going back to school?
I mean, not immediately. I just want to get a job.
Yeah.
And get some money, and then, I don't know, it's still a possibility.
I'm glad you came home.
How was Ashland? Ashland, amazing. Transformative. I'm at a whole new place now, really.
Old Joy's Kurt got no farther than Ashland, 300 miles away. The community college classes he takes seemingly at random only cause him to spin his wheels deeper, as when his own theory of the universe proved incompatible with the material of a physics course in which he found himself.
Yeah. It's that the universe is falling, man. That's what explains it all. The entire universe is in the shape of a falling tear dropping down through space. I'm telling you, man, I don't know how it happened, but that's just the way that it works.
Not only do Property's coterie of dropouts, ex-cons, hookers, and welfare recipients have trouble looking beyond Portland, sometimes they seem barely able to perceive anything beyond their own remote and embattled block. And for some of them, even the mission of saving the neighborhood proves no match for the claims of dope and self-expression.
I'm tired of organizing. I want you to know that, everybody here. I'm sick of it, goddammit. I want to be alone. I want to be a poet. I just want to...
He's freaking out, I can tell.
Yeah, well,
My
family is sick.
The depressed and underemployed ensemble in Matt McCormick's Some Days Are Better Than Others hardly even try to step outside Portland, physically or psychologically.
These debt collectors are making me rethink the whole anti-corporate thing. Or maybe I could just work on commercials for bikes or community gardening centers or something.
Oh, yeah. When's the last time you saw a community gardening commercial?
Eli, a 40-year-old temp with high, if vaguely defined ideals, presents as a study in self-defeat.
Can I help you?
More admirably, Alex, the 16-year-old hero of Paranoid Park, just wants to ride his skateboard. But he can't even do that particularly well, and when he ventures alone under the Burnside Bridge one fateful night to watch and learn from the nearly middle-aged experts who live for the place, he causes the death that plunges him, and thus the film, into desensitized turmoil.
But none of these issues matter to my body. My brain could have debates all night long. We could get a lawyer. My body didn't care. My body wanted only one thing, to get the hell out of there.
Just as Some Days Are Better Than Others demonstrates McCormick's facility with pillow shots, of the kind originally perfected by Yasujiro Ozu, using the materials of 21st century Portland where the Japanese master used those of post-war Tokyo, Cold Weather demonstrates Katz's. But very few of these shots contain Portland's icons, instead capturing the city's melancholic atmosphere in its margins. Given its cinematic potential, isn't there something to be said for returning to Portland? We might not know much about that potential in the first place if Gus Van Sant, the foremost Portland auteur of his generation, hadn't done just that after the burst of Hollywood attention he drew with Mala Noche died down. He's followed that impulse into a bifurcated career of Portland movies and non-Portland movies, the former all based on literary works, generally turning out far more interesting than the latter. Part of that owes to their mixture of fiction and fact. Van Sant's Portland movies often use real Portlanders, and sometimes even Portland notables.
This is Newsbreak. I'm Ken Body. Was it a horrible accident or was it murder?
Alex gets word of his own crime from Ken Body, real-life news anchor at KOIN, namesake station of the KOIN Tower, whose ziggurat-like shape pops out from so many skyline shots, albeit not as readily as Big Pink. And where there's law enforcement in modern Portland cinema, there's Portland native Dan Liu, a real-life sergeant with the police department who, among other film and television gigs, appears in both Paranoid Park and Untraceable. You can sense Van Sant's close relationship with the city in the way he uses its old landmarks, like the St. Francis Hotel, to which Bob retreats in Drugstore Cowboy in order to clean up. My Own Private Idaho turns the Governor Hotel into its hustler headquarters. Of course, Van Sant's pictures use Union Station, Portland's highly visible Romanesque revival rail depot with its illuminated imperative to go by train, but so do many others.
Or is reality what we're seeing with our eyes? And the truth is that the brain does not know the difference between what it sees in its environment and what it remembers.
But who could use The Coming of the White Man, Herman Atkins McNeil's bronze sculpture in Washington Park, more memorably than he did? Portlandia, Raymond Caskey's hammered copper statue second in size only to the Statue of Liberty, stands outside Michael Graves' postmodern Portland building, right next door to City Hall. But you can encounter her more easily in the copper flesh than in the movies, owing to Caskey's fierce defense of its reproduction rights. A low-angle shot and body of evidence casts Portlandia as the implacable face of legal officialdom, a use over which Caskey sued Paramount Pictures and won. I'd personally call Chinatown's House of Louis a landmark too, but I don't know how many Portlanders would agree. Though small, Portland's Chinatown could in theory stand for Chinatown anywhere, though it always seems to play itself in the movies, and hardly ever seems to change in real life. But the modern urban cinema of Portland shows that you can't say the same about the rest of the city, and its films document a number of icons already lost. As recently as the late 1990s, Daryl Zero could duck into the St. Francis while tailing a suspect, but no more. The building went down in 2001. Some Days Are Better Than Others captures not just the husk of downtown fixture Zell Brothers Jewelers, but its demolition. Other aging Portland institutions have met with kinder fates. The Baghdad Theater, the 1927 Hawthorne Boulevard movie house where My Own Private Idaho premiered, recently underwent a renovation into a new wave pub and entertainment venue. Not only was it one of the two theaters What the Bleep Do We Know played at its initial release, the film itself uses it as a stage for its protagonist's ultimate realizations about parallel realities, self-actualization, the Tao of physics, or what have you.
Are all realities existing simultaneously?
Untraceable, another film primarily of interest for its use of Portland locations, knows the city at least well enough to find Oaks Amusement Park a few miles south of downtown, billed in the very early 20th century as the Coney Island of the West, with its preserved skating rink, Wurlitzer, and all.
A circuit court jury in Portland unanimously convicted 22-year-old Armando.
Plenty of people would miss Oaks if it fell to the wrecking ball, but who misses Skid Row? Most of Mala Noche takes place in that formerly sketchy neighborhood on and around West Burnside, part of the area since reclassified from industrial to mixed use, redeveloped and rebranded as the Pearl District. Drugstore Cowboy portrays it before the transformation even more vividly, before the streetcar came and before the famous painted columns of the Lovejoy Viaduct, two of which now stand on 10th Avenue, came down. The Pearl District, the urban growth boundary, the preserved Oaks, Governor Hotel, Baghdad Theater, and Lovejoy columns. all get cited as examples of Portland's aesthetic awareness, its smart urbanism, and that all-important quality of livability. Portland writer John Raymond used the word as the title of a collection containing the short stories which gave Old Joy and Wendy and Lucy their material. It reads as both a nod to and a rebuke of that term so frequently applied to his town. Livability remains no small achievement, but should Portland's aspirations stop there? Keep Portland weird, insist the bumper stickers, as if any living city could, by any means, stay the same over time.
This is the land, between the mountains and the sea.
And how long did Portland's window of true weirdness really stay open? In 1957, its sheer middle-class normality, and similarity in size to Nagasaki, made it the winning candidate for the setting of A Day Called X, a CBS special on how an American city would evacuate in the event of a coming nuclear strike, shot and cast with documentary rigor in real Portland locations, with real Portland townspeople and officials all the way up to rail transit and urban renewal advocating mayor Terry Shrunk. Even in its short history, Portland's modern urban cinema reveals striking changes in the city as setting, something of which, despite their smaller budgets, the independents have made far more astute cinematic use than the majors. But promisingly, more independent Portland features have come out in the past 20 years than ever before. They and others show a city that, despite its livability, remains a place where you can dance to 1960s Latin remixes, ride the rails, get away with murder, or at least manslaughter, take an afternoon stroll with William Burroughs, pass into a void of noir isolation, or simply exist.